Oui, ok. Voilà, je te le fais. Ouais, je vais te faire le nom. Maintenant, je vais faire. Ouais, je fais le même nom, value. Les close-up et tout ça. D'accord? Je commence maintenant. Ok? Pendant la live. Ouais, value un petit peu. Super. À tout à l'heure. Ciao. Bye bye. Salut. Oh.
Integrity, and it's titled, this session here, Empowering an Informed and Engaged Society for Effective Climate Action. Now, I'm the CEO of Futerra, and we've been working for over 20 years on communicating climate. And what I love about the ACE agenda is that it doesn't just talk about information and information integrity, it covers the whole cohort of engaging publics on stories on climate. So from training to public participation, to public awareness, to international cooperation. And the panel that we have joining us today and our opening remarks will talk us through those various facets of the ACE agenda. And then in the second half of the programme, we'll all be working together in a World Cafe style to unpack the different thematic areas of ACE. Before we dive into the session, please be aware that this meeting is live streamed on the UNFCCC website. Recordings will be made available after the event. And if you are registered for COP30, there's an option to watch the meeting virtually via the COP30 platform and follow these discussions. Lastly, please note that the floor language of the session will be in English. Thank you very much from English mother tongue. But there's interpretation into French and Spanish. I'm afraid not Portuguese, but French and Spanish. It's available during the plenaries. So please get an interpretation device should you require one. So we will start with some welcoming remarks from Alice Amorim, the Programme Director of the COP30 Presidency, and then Daniele Violetti. But I'll introduce Daniele in a moment. First, if we can welcome Alice Amorim up to the podium with a warm round of applause.
Can you hear me? Yeah, it's working. Good afternoon to all of you. Lucy, Marcelli, parties, authorities, observers here present. It's an honor to be here representing the COP30 presidency in this very important mandated event. In the context where climate change is a highly politicized and contested issue, the spread of false information or distorted facts can delay necessary actions and lead to ineffective measures. Reliable, consistent, and accurate information empowers individuals, communities, and decision makers to take effective action. The commitment of promoting information integrity is crucial for driving meaningful progress in tackling the climate crisis and building a just, sustainable, and resilient future. That's why, for us in the Brazilian government and the COP30 presidency, we believe it's so important to have, in a context like this of the ACE agenda and at COP30, the highest level of discussion and contributions and exchanges amongst parties and non-parties on how can we move forward in tackling such an important point. The Global Initiative for Information Integrity on Climate Change was launched by the UN, UNESCO, and Brazil during the G20 summit in 2024 and seeks to tackle climate-related disinformation and to promote a healthy and pluralistic communication environment. By boosting science-based dialogue, the initiative supports informed and effective climate action on the road to COP30 and way beyond. We hope to see here in Belém an outcome that is not limited to the negotiation rooms. As you have seen, yesterday, the Declaration on Information Integrity was launched and endorsed by 12 countries. And I know Secretary João will actually go deeper about that. But we have used all the 4 pillars of the COP30 preparations to leverage this conversation because we understand that this is crucial for our 3 main goals with COP30, which means strengthening multilateralism, advancing and accelerating actions, implementation of actions, and getting climate closer to people's lives. That means that if you look into the action agenda of COP30 this year, there was one of the elements of one of the axes was precisely to advance solutions in that front. We used the mutirão to collect different initiatives that are here present in Belém that will be presented to all of you to show that action to combat disinformation is already happening and is a critical element of all collective efforts to tackle climate and to advance in line with the Paris Agreement. So looking forward to hear your ideas, your contributions, and how the system, the UNFCCC process, can actually incorporate this element going forward, which is a critical barrier. If we don't do that, it will continue to be a critical barrier for all of us to advance in securing the Paris Agreement, the Convention, and our collective efforts to tackle the climate crisis. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful event.
Thank you so much, Alice, for really setting the scene wonderfully there and calling out the need to highlight solutions and work together. I would now like to introduce Danielle Violetti, and Danielle is the Programmes Coordinator at UN Climate Change. So warm round of applause for Danielle.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all participants. Very pleased to welcome all of you on behalf of the UNFCCC Secretariat to this very important event where we gather to explore the potential of ACE as a toolbox for building informed and engaged societies. We know that climate change is an existential threat that burdens all of humanity, though not equally. So we also know that climate action becomes truly effective when we work together. Today's event marks another milestone in our collective journey to harness the power of dialogue, cooperation, and inclusion to shape a sustainable and equitable future for all. The 6 elements of ACE are needed more than ever. By fostering education and public awareness, training, strengthening public participation and public access to reliable information, and enhancing international cooperation on these matters at all levels, we can help shift mindsets and behaviors of decision makers and leaders in the public and private sector, civil society, and individuals everywhere. The theme of today's event is particularly timely and significant. Trust in scientific knowledge is essential for effective climate action. Yet it is being actively discredited by suppliers of climate myths and disinformation, actively seeking to undermine climate action itself and the progress made so far. Strengthening information integrity is therefore crucial to building resilient societies supported by an information ecosystem where citizens, communities, and governments have the shared knowledge and practices needed to make informed decisions and take action. Last year, the United Nations, together with Brazil, UNESCO, and other partners, launched the Global Initiative for Information Integrity on Climate Change. The UNFCCC is part of its steering committee. Grounded in the UN Global Principles for Information Integrity launched by the Secretary General in 2023, this initiative provides a framework for multi-stakeholder action to foster a healthier, more human information ecosystem. Structured around a global fund, an institutional agenda, and campaigns on climate change, the initiative addresses the need for policies that project information integrity, safeguard those reporting on climate issues, and support the development of informed and inclusive climate action. Earlier this year, the Global Fund issued a first open call for proposal to support non-profit organizations conducting research, communication, and reporting that strengthen information integrity on climate change. By integrating these aids into national policies, plans, strategies, and action, countries can build more informed, participatory, and resilient society capable of distinguishing fact from falsehood and advancing inclusive and effective climate action. With this, I would like to close by thanking Marcel and Lucy for moderating today's event and guiding our conversation today. And I would like to thank you all for joining here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniele. What a wonderful way to set the scene with Alice. And we're delighted to say we have a special guest, an additional speaker to join us today. We are absolutely honoured to be joined by Ambassador Luqman Faili. And Ambassador Faili is the G77 and China Chair. And Ambassador Faili will share a few remarks from the floor. Great, thank you.
Good afternoon all. Let me first thank the Presidency for giving me the opportunity to share remarks. I'm happy to be here on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. I see that this is an important event which highlights the need for actions for climate empowerment. We reaffirm the critical importance of action for climate empowerment as a cross-cutting enabler for the full and effective implementation of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. As parties consider the review of the 4th Annual Summary Report under the 10-year Glasgow Work Programme on ACE and its short-term action plan, the group emphasises the need to strengthen implementation across all 6 ACE elements: education, training, public awareness, public participation, access to information, and finally, information cooperation. The Group of 77 in China highlights their importance and the need for strengthening their implementation. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will start a panel presentation, Foster Information Integrity through ACE. This panel will explore how the 6 ACE elements, education, public awareness, training, public participation, public access to information, and international cooperation on these matters serve as essential tools for informing and engaged societies. In turn, how bus information integrity is a prerequisite for effective ACE implementation. So, to start this panel, I want to invite to join us in the stage João Brandt, Secretary of Digital Policies in the Secretariat of Social Communication, the President of the Republic of Brazil. A round of applause for João. Also, I want to invite Charlotte Scadan, Senior Advisor on Information Integrity in the United Nations Global Communications. Round of applause for Charlotte. We will join also our partners, James Fan, Executive Director, Internews Earth Journalism Network, Rich Wilson, CEO, ISV Foundation, Maciel Cairo, ACE Negotiator, the Dominican Republic, and Juanita Silva, Advisor, Global Optimism. A round of applause for our panel discussion, please. I am from Rio de Janeiro, and we have one rule there. We make the applause to the people come for the stage, and we didn't stop since everybody be in the place. So, okay, now everybody's here. Thank you for coming. I will pass the floor first to João and Charlotte for their opening remarks.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll give it a go. So maybe we could go to the first slide, please. I'm just going to begin by addressing what information integrity is. It's a relatively new concept that has really kind of gained traction in the past couple of years. And I want to explain why it matters at this really critical point in time. Information integrity is a growing global policy priority. The UN has been activated around this issue for at least the last couple of years, very intensely, recognizing it as fundamental to progress on climate action and also across all of the Sustainable Development Goals. We see now governments, civil society, educational institutions, the media, and the private sector recognizing its importance. And for the first time, information integrity has been added on the action agenda here at COP30. As laid out in the UN Global Principles for Information Integrity, this concept refers to an information ecosystem in which reliable and accurate information is available to all, enabling people to engage meaningfully in public life, make informed decisions, and exercise their rights. Next slide. But this is not, unfortunately, our current reality. Instead, we face escalating risks, undermining our information environments. And this is degrading public access to evidence-based information. It is impacting decision-making, and it's really having a negative impact on societal trust and cohesion. Next slide. We at the UN see that we are at a critical juncture right now, where two of humanity's most pressing challenges have become dangerously intertwined. And those two challenges are the erosion of our information integrity, the erosion of the integrity of our information ecosystem, and of course the climate crisis. And here is some of what we're facing. The spread of disinformation campaigns and hate speech. We see the harassment and targeting of experts, advocates, educators, scientists, and civil society members. We see the malicious use of digital media and AI technologies, and the monetizing of disinformation and hate. We're also facing disruptions to our ability to access and share information, and this includes the decline of independent journalism, attacks on press freedom, and of course the role of emerging technologies, including AI, and algorithms that limit information diversity. And of course, the challenge of continuing digital divides. So next slide. So here are just some examples, I won't read them all, of the kind of claims that we see in our research and that we hear about from partners and colleagues across the world that are designed to mislead the public and policymakers and to undermine climate action. They include, claiming that climate change is overstated, that there's no scientific consensus, that it's a manufactured scare tactic used by elites, or even that elites are controlling the weather. And next, please. And we see this kind of content traveling at a very high volume across many spaces, online, but also offline. The winners, of course, are fossil fuel interests, political actors, and digital influencers monetizing outrage. And those who lose out are marginalized communities who face disproportionate harm and are targeted with this kind of disinformation. And ultimately, people are not empowered to engage with climate action and climate solutions. So this huge, enormous challenge that we face is precisely why, as you just heard, we launched the Global Initiative for Information Integrity on Climate Change a year ago. And I'll now turn it over to João, who's going to speak about that initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yes, I think it's important now to connect the information integrity debate with the ACE debates. Of course, we're talking about a cross-cutting issue that goes and helps and underpins the action on education, public awareness, training, public participation, public access to information, and international cooperation. But we would like to highlight the direct connection with public awareness and public access to information, especially when we discuss about the obstacles to realize and to undertake the actions on that. So I think bringing information integrity to the table at this moment means not only talking about the positive actions that member states can do and move forward, but also how to deal with the obstacles and the externalities of these obstacles to the ACE agenda and to the Glasgow program. So we're meaning, as Charlotte is saying, that information integrity is built on societal trust and resilience, healthy incentives, public empowerment, independent, free and pluralistic media, and transparency and research. Next, please. So this global initiative was launched at the end of our presidency at G20, as was mentioned before, and it's joined by Belgium, Chile, Denmark, Spain, Finland, France, Morocco, United Kingdom, Sweden, Uruguay, and research networks and NGOs, such as the Forum on Information and Democracy, the International Panel on Information Environment, and Climate Action Against Disinformation. So here is a bunch of actions that already happened in the last year, but I would highlight the declaration launched yesterday that brings the idea of commits the 12 countries that have signed, but also calls for donors, for private sector, for governments to work upon this agenda. Next, please. Some of the strategic pillars that the initiative brings are strengthening research into climate information integrity globally, and it's not by chance that IPCC, WMO, and other institutions around the climate debate are part of the advisory group of the initiative, because of course our work stems and comes from the work that has already been done in the last decades that are around this issue. But of course we have to support evidence-based action and solutions. We're talking about trying to bring to implementation and to create impact, positive impact on the climate agenda. Next, please. So this is basically a view on how we see coalition and cooperation and a multi-stakeholder perception, bringing evidence, bringing investigative journalism, political engagement, strategic communications, public awareness and information and advocacy that can lead to evidence-based insights, transparency and accountability, bolstering independent media, supporting accurate, reliable information, capacity building and training, and going to public awareness and empowerment and greater societal trust and resilience, and of course climate action and future resilience. What means that's absolutely connected to the ACE agenda and to the Glasgow program. Next, please. So, integrating information integrity onto the ACE agenda means recognizing the risks to climate information integrity, considering, of course, information integrity as cross-cutting across the 6 ACE elements, but I would reinforce that we should consider a specific approach to public awareness and public access to information. What means not only bringing the positive approach, but also how to deal with the obstacles of the attacks that for financial or political reasons the climate action suffers. Finally, we would like to reinforce the need for encouraging parties to support and develop strategies to strengthen information integrity on climate change and reinforce research on the threats to climate information integrity. Next. That's it. I think that's the introduction that I would like to bring. Thank you very much for your time, and we hope to continue discussing that until the review of the Glasgow program next year.
Thank you, João and Charlotte. We understand this integrity of information in this global mutirão is really important to face the misinformation and also save lives in this context of climate crisis. So the integrity of information is one of the most important things we have here in our hands to advance now to protect the future, but have to be in the present. So thank you for all the efforts. We will now pass for our panel, and maybe we can start with Juanita. Can be? Juanita, the question we have for you is, why do you think there is a growing crisis of trust in the climate information ecosystem? And how does this affect people's ability to take meaningful climate action? You have 2 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you for coming.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It was clearly not the optimal day to lose my voice, so sorry, I'm going to do my best. I believe there's a growing crisis of trust in climate information ecosystem because people are increasingly caught between too much noise and too little credibility. So studies show that more than 40% of the world population has been exposed to some kind of climate disinformation online. And combined with the fact that trust in traditional news outlets has fallen below 50%, we are clearly in deep, deep trouble. I've been working in the climate space for almost a decade now, and I'm always very vocal in my social media, so I've realized this year is the year where I've gotten the worst kind of conspiracy theory comments on my Instagram, so I will share some of my favorites just so you get the idea of what's out there. Climate change is the world's largest scam. This is just propaganda to make countries poorer. And my personal favorite, glaciers are growing and not shrinking. So that's the kind of things we see on social media every day. Why is this? Over the past decade, climate science has moved from scientific circles to social media feeds. And in social media feeds, the algorithm rewards outrage, simplicity, and emotional reaction so much more than it rewards actual accuracy. This has created a fragmented landscape in which misinformation and politicization thrive. When climate narratives are co-opted by partisan agendas, many people stop trusting who is saying something even before they understand what that person is actually saying. So the erosion of trust directly undermines people's ability to take meaningful decisions and meaningful climate action. When the public can distinguish between fact, spin, and manipulation, what follows is paralysis, because we don't know what to do, we don't know what is actually real. People feel that nothing is certain, institutions appear self-interested, and collective action becomes harder to mobilize. So rebuilding trust means recentering communication on transparency, local relevance, and moral honesty. Moving from these abstract data points that we see everywhere to stories that actually show tangible solutions, lived experiences, and shared common values. Stories that make people feel like they belong in the solutions and not that they're being constantly lectured by someone online. Only then, I believe that information can actually become empowerment instead of just noise.
Perfect. Thank you, Juanita. I will move the floor for James. James, based on your work with journalists worldwide, is our collective challenge in this area related to access to or the lack of accurate and reliable climate information? What are you seeing on the ground? Can you tell for us, please? 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcele. It's nice to be here. For those not familiar, the Earth Journalism Network, we are a global community of over 34,000 journalists around the world dedicated to improving coverage of climate change and the environment. Last year, we carried out a survey of over 800 climate journalists, the largest such survey ever carried out as far as we know, to try and determine what is happening on the ground. First of all, the good news. 77% of journalists say that climate coverage has increased over time, and 82% of journalists say that their climate stories have more prominence now than 10 years ago. 72% of journalists say they are able to cover both problems and solutions. This is really important, to cover solutions to give people a feeling of hope as well as understanding the challenges of climate change. And we have documented so many impacts on public policies, on regulations, on debate as a result of good climate journalism. We've seen how low carbon development has been, policies have been boosted in places like India and Vietnam. In India and Fiji, we documented how villagers that were threatened by sea level rise were resettled as a result of good coverage. In Uganda and Vietnam, we documented how sand mining was causing erosion, and that was also banned in several key areas. But now the bad news. Journalists say that even though climate coverage has improved, it does not match what is needed. I think that is obvious. 35% of journalists say they have been threatened for their climate coverage, threatened financially, physically, legally, and a similar number, over a third of journalists, say that they have to practice self-censorship. They have to restrict what they report because of these threats. 62% of journalists, a majority, still feel pressured to include sources who are skeptical of climate change. This is a phenomenon we call false balance, and it's improved over time. A lot of countries now you don't see that so much, but in many places it's still a problem. And of course, most of all, journalists say they're seeing a massive rise in mis and disinformation. 93% say the overwhelming source of this mis and disinformation is social media. But there are things we can do to help address that, and I hope to talk more about that in the future, but I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Can we make a round of claps for our speakers, please? I will move the floor for Rich. Rich, how is the public debate currently representing the desire of a vast majority of people in terms of their support of ambitious climate action? And also share with us the global citizen experience, because it's important for this global material we are making. So the floor is yours, 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marceli. Look, I mean, I think we all know, don't we, that we are in uncharted territory, right? I mean, we all know the stat of 89% of people who want ambitious climate action. When I started my career, I was working as a climate advisor in the UK government in the year 2000. And in those days, the level of support for climate action was often going between like 45% and 52%. In the UK, it's recently dropped from about 72% to 66%. That's called a decisive majority. And whether it's in Brazil, it's 68%. In the US, I mean, so in the US, it's currently 66% of people support more ambitious climate action. I mean, these are what you call decisive majorities of support. However, the politics doesn't reflect that, and this is clearly an enormous problem. And I think a lot of what we've heard about already from the collapse of journalism and fake news, etc., is really kind of feeding into that situation. But one of the areas of hope, I think, is that there's also 89% of the population want to see stronger misinformation laws. And we have this very interesting situation, which for me is the first time in my career, whereby politicians who historically more or less wanted to follow public debate because they thought that's where the votes lied, there seems to be a political illiteracy emerging into the system, and that's why it's vital we think about these things in terms of these kind of ecosystems. Now, one of the reasons we're here at COP30 is supporting this Global Citizens Assembly that Marcelo has been a great supporter, as well as the Brazilian government. And part of the reason that's so important as a kind of legacy of COP30 is we know that this vast movement of public participation processes are brilliant at dealing with the issue of misinformation, because the real challenge comes into place when you go from the top level, yeah, I want to see climate action, but actually in my community, now what's going to happen on the ground? And people have concerns about new infrastructure, but this isn't a climate concern, this is just a development concern, whether people are going to have a new Amazon warehouse next to their house, a new road. So fundamentally what we need to have in place is new governance infrastructure, and, a global mutual to be able to support the conversations of how we move to implementation. And that's why I'm working with ACE and Marcelia and others across the COP30 team. It's so heartening to see people recognizing that we have to shift towards implementation, but to do so, we need new governance infrastructure, which is really anchored in communities to do that.
Thank you, Rich. We are understanding the challenge, so I will move the floor to Lucy to make the last question in our panel. Lucy, please.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcele, and thank you. And a round of applause again for the speakers so far. That's great. Our final question in this challenges section is for Maciel Caro. And Maciel is an ACE negotiator, Dominican Republic. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. My question for you is, in terms of challenges, what challenges do countries face at the national level in creating the conditions to enable informed and empowered public engagement in climate policy and action? 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you. That is an excellent question, Lucy. I know this is not necessarily protocol, but I do want to take the opportunity to highlight the effort that the presidency has made in coming up with this event and putting together the Initiative of Information Integrity. Coming from a developing country, it is for us highly essential that we are able to access information that is not only science-based, but that also has data that the public is able to access. Some of the main ideas that come to mind when thinking about the challenges is, and seeing the broad range of speakers that we have today, I would like to start from the current date to the past. So right now we have a lot of different ways in which the public will use the information and different platforms that people use the information. So when you have a developing country that has part of the country that doesn't have access to internet and doesn't use social media in the same way that other countries are able to access the social media platforms, or that we have frequent power outages, so you can't really rely on the most modern ways that people access to information. We have to heavily rely on the traditional ways that people access the information, such as printed press and sometimes the radio. One of the most ironic things that we found in 2022 when we had a climate change perception, knowledge, and practice survey was that a large part of the population didn't rely on the government information. However, they relied more in the priest from the church based on the information that they could provide on climate rather than in the government itself. So the institutional arrangements need to be strong, need to be collaborative, and need to be inclusive to tackle that challenge. Secondly, the budgetary constraints that often institutions have in order for them to shape, design, and implement effective communication strategies that address climate change is a very big challenge. But also, and someone had already mentioned this, the climate story. So the storytelling has been evolving, and it's important for governments to identify what it is the correct language that they need to use to reach a certain population. So we have a lot of diversity in the Dominican Republic, and oftentimes you can't really speak to people in the north of the island the same way that you speak to people in the east of the island who is heavily dependent on tourism, for example. And then the way that you speak to someone whose main income structure is agriculture is not going to be the same way that you speak to someone that, you know, depends on tourism or that works for the industry. So we have launched a different map roads over the years that tackle different economic aspects that we have. For example, the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, alongside to the Ministry of Environment, they launched a roadmap to tackle the consumption of plastic, because we had a law. This is an example. We had a law that was passed back in like 2020, but it hadn't been able to come into full effect. And a lot of that had to do with the way that we are able to communicate with the population to get them to understand and be on board and create that type of behavioral change. So those are some of the key challenges that we have. And one of the ways that the Dominican Republic is trying to tackle those aspects is actively engaging in the process of policy making. So for example, the NDC in the Dominican Republic is a completely participatory process, And we have participation from civil society, from academia, from the private sector, as well as the public sector. And we have thematic tables. So each already prioritized and identified sector that is going to contribute with information to the NDC is invited. And also at the international level, our delegation is multidisciplinary. A lot of delegations have colleagues from Ministry of Environment or from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Dominican Republic has delegates from the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, has delegates from the National Office of Information, which is the leader to gather and process effective data. And we also have people alongside from the National Council of Climate Change. We have people from the Ministry of Agriculture. We have people from academia. And that way we can adequately identify how we can bring the information back to the country and make it accessible to those different sectors.
Yeah, thank you so much for that intervention. And I think I feel the same way as you feel about the ACE agenda as about the effort that was put into IPCC Annual Report 6, which for the first time really called out not just the problems of information integrity, but the need to develop narratives, public storytelling, to have a focus on behavioral interventions. And so I think this is now a great moment to, with Marceli as well, to open up the second round of discussions. We've spoken about the challenges. We're now moving to the solutions. And Marcel, I'm going to pass back to you again, noting that in your earlier comment on challenges, I noticed you already, as clearly a born storyteller, moved to the solutions. And I think that's great. And the final piece I would love to bring in is storytelling really works. We're actually 22 times more likely to remember a story than a fact. It's incredible, 22 times more likely. So to open up the solutions part of this discussion, Marcel, I'll pass back to you and ask, how are ACE and information integrity connected? And how can they reinforce each other to ensure individuals and societies are equipped to support just and equitable climate transitions?
Well, they are definitely interlinked. I see information integrity as not necessarily inserted in ACE, but as a key element that it is optimal and essential to be discussed during the conversations of ACE. Because when we look at the ACE elements, we can discuss education all we want, but if we don't have teachers that have the right materials for them to actually implement the education materials in the classroom, then we aren't really doing anything just by talking about climate change. So some of the things that we can do to tackle and to close that gap. In the Dominican Republic, we have a dedicated fund for research. This is led by the Ministry of Superior Education. It's called Fondo CIT, and it covers a wide range of different subjects that are picked up every year. And the research is funded by the government so that there can be a superior level research on those subjects. And then one of the things I was saying about the storytelling, for example, the National Council for Climate Change had an initiative through social media, which was called the Climate Little School, in Spanish, Escuelita Climática. And so what it did is that we had the head of communications. He would often interview different relevant stakeholders that relate to the climate change policy-making aspect, and then he would create some very short educational videos that address key aspects. So we would upload that to our platform, and that would be easier for people to reach because, as we've been saying, storytelling matters. And another thing that the Dominican Republic has is that whenever there is a climate change project that is approved, we make sure that it has one specific dedicated line addressed to education or to raising awareness. However, when we speak about raising awareness, it's important to note that we have found with our surveys that awareness does not necessarily equate the impact that we expected to have. So to go further on that, we try to work very closely with the territories, and we try to work very closely with the different institutions in the public sector. So every year we will go to different institutions and we will have sensitization at a medium and decision-making level, so that they are adequately engaged and that they understand that the work that we do at a local and international level will eventually yield fruitful results for our country.
Round of applause, please, for Marcel. Thank you. I will now pass the floor back to Marceli.
Thank you. Marcel, I want to be your friend and talk about this all the afternoon. I will give the floor again for Rich, and we talk a little bit about Global Citizens Assembly, but coming back about this proposal of solution, what is and how this participatory model can make citizens' voice a lasting safeguard for information integrity. Please, Rich.
Thanks, Marceli, and I'll try and be closer to the mic this time. Lucy, I was just thinking about your 22 times storytelling point, which I've heard, and it's true, isn't it? And I don't think we've got the data on what happens in participatory processes, but you see obviously similar things happening, whereby you've got representative groups of people talking about issues they care a lot about. And I think what happens is there's this mixture of storytelling, personal testimony, and of course the people who are sharing their versions of evidence, which might be fake news or might not, let's face it. But under those conditions, you've got a mixed media of information, interpretation, and engagement, which just allows that diversity of learning methods to kind of come to the fore. What the Global Citizens Assembly it will be launched next Thursday, initiated the post-COP30 process, and it consists of two components. A civic assembly, which is demographically representative of the global population, and it will be running in the first half of 2026, looking at the issue of kind of food systems. With the sortition has already happened, which has dropped 100 dots around the world, and at each location, a community-based organisation is identified to ensure we've got a sample which is an accurate reflection of the global population. But the big power, where we get the real power, is the community assemblies. And there are 7,500 formal participatory processes taking place across the world right now that we know about, but we estimate that there's hundreds of thousands out there. And so by COP31, we will have had 5,000 community assemblies run, so there'll be hundreds of thousands of people participating. And by the global stocktake in 2028, we hope to get 1 million involved. That's an ambitious goal. So hopefully, together, if people are inspired by this, they can get involved as part of that process. But fundamentally, what we're seeking to do here is create this infrastructure of what you might call a shadow governance regime that already exists. And I can see Estasia sitting on the front row. She's done incredible work looking at climate assemblies with indigenous communities and climate protectors. There's a vast movement of people out there running these new governance regimes, and the Global Citizens Assembly is about creating a network to bring those in to climate diplomacy. And so just as in Paris, through the action agenda, we brought in cities, civil society and businesses. Following COP30, we can bring in people to the future of climate diplomacy.
Thank you, Rich. I will move for Juanita. How can climate education and literacy give people the tools to recognize disinformation and to strengthen resilience to misinformation? And like a young person, the climate education for us is really important. So the integrity information, climate education are really close or not? I think yes, but the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much for this question. And it hits really close to home. I'm from Chile, and we have presidential elections this weekend. And we have seen how my country is following the footsteps of other countries where misinformation has been used to manipulate elections. I want to talk about the solutions because we've seen in Chile that some candidates have been using these tactics, bots, fake news, etc., to get ahead in the presidential race. And what I have found personally to be a very, very useful solution are fact checkers. So if anyone is a fact checker here and is taking that really, really important job, I thank you very deeply. But I want to talk about other solutions, and I want to push back on what was said a little bit before, because climate education and literacy can be one of the most powerful tools we have to counter disinformation. Yes, I agree, and the UN and this presidency has been doing an amazing job on that, but I think this is only if we expand what we mean by education. So for too long, I believe that climate has been focused on the science itself, so emissions, temperature rise, impacts, measurement, which is, of course, don't get me wrong, absolutely fundamental and important, but it's not enough. It's not enough if we're not teaching how to navigate the information ecosystem itself, the information ecosystem around all this data. Studies show that communities with stronger climate literacy are up to 30% more resilient to conspiracy theories, and that's because education doesn't just transfer facts, it builds cognitive resilience. One particular effective approach is what psychologists call the inoculation theory. So just like we do with vaccines, where we're exposed to a weakened version of a virus, the inoculation theory exposes us to a weakened piece of misinformation and then explains us why it is misleading, so we can then go out in the world, and when we encounter these kinds of headlines or misleading news, etc., we're able to identify and reject them. This means that climate literacy shouldn't only be about emissions targets, policy agreements, which, again, don't get me wrong, is absolutely the priority here. But it should also be about how we teach information, how information is shared, how it spreads, who benefits from distortion, and how emotions are used to manipulate it. When people understand both the science and the storytelling behind climate, they can stay open-minded without being naive. So I 100% agree on the importance of storytelling. But ultimately, climate literacy is civic literacy. It gives citizens the tools to think critically, to question without falling into cynicism, and to rebuild trust through understanding. In that sense, every newsroom, every campaign, every organization here has a role to play in strengthening our collective immunity to misinformation. So I think those are the solutions, and that's where efforts should be focused on this agenda.
Thank you, Anita. I will move the floor to James, and understanding we are in one copy with culture included in the agenda, we understand the communication is really important for all us to mobilize and to engage in. So what kinds of support or partnerships from philanthropy, government, private sector, everyone in this spirit of mutirão are most needed right now to sustain independent, fact-based and engaging climate communication? Also, how can journalists and social media creators work together with governments, can raise public awareness effectively? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Marceli. So what can we do to improve the situation on the ground? Well, talking about partnerships, a great example is the Climate Change Media Partnership, which is a collaboration between Internews' Earth Journalism Network and the Stanley Center for Peace and Security. This CCMP has been bringing journalists from the Global South to the climate COPs for the last 18 years. We've altogether brought hundreds of journalists here to cover the summits, producing thousands of stories. And as Lucy said, that's really what it's about. It's telling stories. And these journalists do a wonderful job at it. That is their profession. There are certainly many other good partnerships out there. There's you may be familiar with the Climate Action Against Disinformation Network, a group of 120 organizations working for climate information integrity. What are the kinds of things we can do? At the Earth Journalism Network, we provide training workshops, we provide grants for story, we support local media, we do a lot of investigative reporting. We've produce special reports on greenwashing and how companies tout climate benefits that aren't really there. We just recently came out with a special report on how the building out of AI data centers and cryptocurrency mining operations are causing huge climate and environmental impacts. And there's so much more, but let me just make 3 key points here. First of all, we really need to support local media, okay? This is the media that is hurting the most. There are a lot of very strong multinational media out there that are doing well and doing great reporting. But it's really at the local level where the media is hurting, where the traditional business model has collapsed, and where we're seeing news deserts. And that's especially true about climate change. And it's the local media that we found that creates the most impacts because they tell the stories in local languages and they know the situation on the ground. The second point, this requires investment. We are used to thinking that the media can support itself. But in many places, that is just no longer the case. Again, the traditional business models collapsed. And when it comes to, especially when it comes to climate change and the environment, we're just not seeing enough stories out there. So we don't just need private investment. Frankly, we need the public sector to support climate communications and media. And we need philanthropy to step in if we want the kind of climate coverage that this world needs. And finally, we need to work more with social media content creators, so-called influencers. That's where a lot of audiences are going to, and they can be really important communicators about the climate crisis. What we're doing at the Earth Journalism Network is bringing together traditional journalists with social media content creators so they can learn from each other. Influencers can learn how to access good information and explain it accurately. Journalists can learn how to tell their stories in a more compelling way using short-form video and social media platforms to get climate information out. We call this program Earth Shorts, and we think it's a great model to help counter climate disinformation and boost climate information integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, James. We earned a lot of important information here in this panel with a lot of challenges, but also a lot of solutions. And this is also something important to highlight in this COP30 inside Amazonia, when we are here for the best climate decisions. So look for the solutions coming from the ground is really important to us, and integrity of information is one solution coming also from the ground. So I want to move back for João Brandt and Charlotte to provide some final remarks to us in this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel. It's been great to hear from all of you, Richard, Marcial, Juanita, James. I think we're quite not only aligned in the way we see, but also the way we think we should move forward. And it's good to understand that actually the fight for defending, promoting information integrity is, of course, already happening in place. We know that. It's been decades of work of climate activists and organizations on that, but we can bring that to attention of negotiators and of other players involved in terms of the need to deal not only with the natural or positive obligations that come from the ACE program, but also to deal with the obstacles that other players are doing to this to become reality on the ground. So I'm glad to see that and to see how close we are in terms of what has to be in the diagnosis, but also in what has to be done. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, I'd like to reinforce what Raj just said about how inspiring it is actually to hear all of these amazing solutions on the panel today, but also throughout this week. I mean, there have been so many information integrity related events happening here in Belém already. And, you know, around the world, we're seeing really incredible examples of tireless efforts to strengthen the information ecosystem for climate action. And I think, you know, that is what gives me hope in this work. What we need to do is try and kind of scale up and scale out some of those community level efforts, you know, right up to some of the global efforts that we're doing through our global initiative. And as João said, I think increasing awareness and recognition that information integrity is fundamental for effective climate action is key. So I think that's, that's incumbent upon us to continue to make that case and to bring the evidence base and talk about what effective solutions look like. But, we really appreciate the opportunity to talk here today. And as I said, it's very inspiring to hear from all of you doing this great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. We are finalizing this panel, but I just want to highlight inside my journey to be Presidency of Climate Champion. And when I was just climate activist in Realengo, my neighborhood, one of the first things I started to learn and study about was about the ACE Hub program and efforts about communication and climate education and how this is important for the youth around the world. So it's my absolutely honor to be here with you in this moderation. We are finalizing this panel, so thank you, and a round of claps again for all our panelists, please. And I will give the floor to Lucy to conduct the next part of our meeting here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcele. It's been such a delight to co-moderate with you. Panelists, thank you. Yes, you may exit the panel now. Thank you. There's always that moment of, do I go? Yes, now is the time. Marcele, I think you're also going to be leaving us for an hour or so while we do the World Cafe, and we break you all into groups. But Marcele, we hope you'll be able to join us back for some closing remarks for the final piece. So thank you, Marcele.
I hope so.
Yeah, thank you, Marcele. Thank you, everyone. Oh, thank you so much. Such delight. All right. So I feel we have lifted the energy. As Marcele said, we were at the post-lunch panel, and the wonderful panelists and my co-moderator, Marcele, have really lifted up all the energy. And now we're going to keep it going with some breaking out into groups, and we're going to have an opportunity for everyone to share their own experiences, and collectively we're going to explore this ACE toolbox, the Action for Climate Empowerment toolbox. We've heard so many wonderful stories and interventions about how it's applied in various formats, countries, regions, on different issues. We're going to be looking at climate planning, policies, measures, and how that can strengthen information integrity, foster public engagement, and accelerate effective and inclusive climate action. Now, how we're going to do that is with a World Cafe format. And what you can see on the screen now are the 4 topics that we will explore in the World Cafe format. And we have 4 stations. Now, Laura, remind me, is it 1, 2, 3, and 4? Great, thank you so much. So in this corner here, we will have Station 1, which is empowering citizens through climate literacy, with some fantastic facilitators. Thank you so much for joining us. Christine Usden, Global Director, Climate Education, Cambridge University Press and Assessment, and Isaitis Cintron Rodriguez, Columbia University and ACE Observatory. So that's, stay for a moment, I'll introduce, and then we're going to be moving Group 1 into this corner here. Station 2 at the back will focus on enhancing the accessibility, reliability and effectiveness of information on climate change. Again, wonderful facilitators, Hannah Lapalainen, docent, Pan-Eurasian Experiment Programme, Secretary General, University of Helsinki, and Sadatu Gambo Madak, National ACE Focal Points, Nigeria. So that'll be in this corner here. Station 3 over here will focus on mobilising children and youth for climate leadership. Facilitators, thank you again, JP Amaral, Head of Nature, Alana, and Ayush Dwivedi Youngo. So thank you so much. That'll be here. And lastly, in this corner at the back here, Station 4 will focus on pathways for effective ACE implementation. And our facilitators are Asif Nawaz Shah, Global Covenant of Mayors, and Azul Schwarzman, World Benchmarking Alliance. Okay, so I will allow the groups to introduce the exercise, but you're going to have a short introduction and then you're going to participate in a group discussion, and you'll then swap, because as it's World Cafe, you get to do you get to do 2 rounds. So you can pick 2 of these 4 topics, and the stations will remain set, and you can move yourself between them. So if you find yourself at a station where there's, you know, a huge amount of people, you might want to move yourself around because you have an opportunity to do that station in a second round. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. I am sorry to say interpretation is not available during the group discussions, and those joining us online, there's a QR code on screen, and you may provide your input that way if you wish to. So I wish you all a wonderful discussion. You can stand up, have a little shake, big breathe, and move yourselves into your stations. And it might be slightly less than 30 minutes, but we will call you when it's time to move around. Thank you so much.
so